Okay, it is 1 p.m. Central Time, and I'm Geoff Perlman. I'm the founder and CEO of Xojo. I'm here with Tim Dietrich, and we're going to be doing a webinar about using Xojo and NetSuite. So we're going to be recording this, so if you want to pass the video on, it'll be on YouTube later on, I guess probably maybe this afternoon or tomorrow, so you'll be able to watch it again, or you can pass it to other people that didn't get a chance to attend. And so I'm going to let Tim introduce himself, and then we're going to start in with some demos. If you have any questions, type them in the Q&A area, and we're going to get to all the questions towards the end of the presentation. So Tim.
Okay, thanks, Geoff. I'm Tim Dietrich. I'm an independent contract software developer that specializes in NetSuite. I've been developing in NetSuite since late 2017, so not a whole lot of time. And I've been using Xojo for all kinds of things since 2014, so it's been a while. I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, and I'll have my website shown later on, but I'm reading off a slide in case you can't tell.
Okay.
So I'll let you take it, Geoff.
Okay, so I'm going to give, for those of you, I know some of you are here and are Xojo users, but we also have some people that are coming from NetSuite. And so I'm going to give a real quick 5-minute demo of Xojo for those that are coming from NetSuite in case they haven't seen it before. And then Tim is going to show us how to do integration between Xojo and NetSuite. So let me get Xojo up here and share my screen. Okay. All right, so this is Xojo, and when you launch Xojo, you actually get the opportunity to pick the type of project you want to create. Desktop projects, web projects, console applications, which if you're not familiar with those, they're basically like desktop applications, but they have no user interface at all. So they're great for apps that would need to run on servers and things like that, and iOS applications. We're also in beta testing on Android as well, so you'll soon be able to build Android apps as well. All right, so this is a desktop app, and basically when you open a project in Xojo, you've got your project list over on the sides. This is all the windows or web pages if it's a web app, or screens if it's a mobile app. All your code, everything shows up in this project panel over here, which we call the navigator. Then the center area is the editor. So when you click on something in your project, like I've got a window selected, then the editor for that item shows up here. So we've got our layout editor for editing a window. And then the sidebar over here on the right, this panel shows you a library of interface controls that you can use. You can also switch it over to the inspector, which gives you the ability to edit individual properties of the thing you have selected. So for example, if I want to change the window title, if I want to change the type of window it is, if it has a close box or not, that sort of thing. So I'm going to do a really quick demo. I'm going to just drag out a couple of text fields and position them on the screen. And what I'm going to do is just make a button that adds the values together, that sums them up between the two fields. So I've got two fields and a button. And you can see if I go to the inspector, I've got the button is here. So I've got the controls. Now I want to write some code. And the way to do that is to decide which control should execute this code. So for example, I know that I want the code to execute when the user clicks the OK button. So once you decide on which control is going to do that, double click it, and you'll get a list of events. And this control has a lot of events, but the only event we really care about for a button typically is the pressed event. That means the user pressed the button. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that switches me over to the code editor. And you can see over in the navigator here that we're in the pressed event of button 1, which is on window 1. And those are just the default names. You can call them whatever you want, but we'll just use the default names for now. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable with the keyword var, and I'm going to call it sum. And I want it to be an integer. So var sum is integer. That creates a variable. Now I'm going to set sum equal to, and what I want is I want to take the text of the text fields, convert them to numbers so we can add them together and add them to sum. So I just start typing the name of the field, text field, and you can see we autocomplete as you type. And then you type a period to get to any of the properties of that control. So one of the properties is called text. That's the text in the field. And you can see if I start typing that, it autocompletes. Now, I don't want to add the text together because that would be concatenating the values. I want to actually add them together. I want to do addition. So I'll put a dot and 2 integer. So that'll convert that text into a number. Then I can do the same thing for the other field. Okay, so we're taking the integer values from the text of the 2 text fields, adding them together and putting them into this variable called sum. And lastly, just so we can see the result, I'm going to use a command called message box, which just brings up a like an alert style box with a button. And I'm going to put the sum is, and now I'm going to add sum with the plus sign, but sum is a number. So I need to convert it to text, or in this case, text is called a string. So just like to integer, I can type to string. So that's going to take the string version of the sum and concatenate it with this message, the sum is, and display it in the message box. So now that I've written the code, if I want to test it, I can just press run, and that builds the app and launches it. Now, we build, for the desktop, we build native applications with native controls, which is important because when the operating system has features like spell checking or autocorrect or whatever, you just get those automatically. So I'm going to test my code. I'm going to type in a couple of numbers here. And there it is. There's my message. There's the message box with my message in it. Okay, so you also have a debugger. So when something goes wrong, you can use the debugger to figure out why it went wrong. And you'll notice there's these little dashes on the side here. If I put if I click on a dash, it becomes a little red arrow. And that means that the code's going to stop on that line, so I can kind of watch it execute. So I'm going to press run again. And I'll type in my numbers. I'll choose some different numbers. Okay, and it drops into the debugger. And I can see the line I'm on. And there's some buttons to resume, to stop completely. If you figured out what the problem was, you can step one line at a time, that sort of thing. Down here, you can see some values. Like I can see that sum is currently 0. So I'm going to go ahead and move past the sum line. Okay, now you can see sum is 6. So you can kind of watch how things are executing and figure out, decide what's working right, what's not working right, etc. So that's the debugger. I'm giving you, again, a very nickel tour here of it. So once you've built your whole app with all your windows and menus and things, and you're ready to actually give the app to other people to use, then you click build. And build will create a standalone version of the app that you can distribute. Now, the way Xojo's licensing works is that you can download Xojo for free. You can use it as much as you want. You only need to buy a license when you're ready to actually build. So you can actually learn it. You can build your whole app if you want to. And then when you're ready, just buy a license. And the licenses are for a year. You can go to our website to get information on the licensing. But that's basically how the licensing works. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we're having a sale this week. Actually, it runs through next Monday. It's 20% off. So if you're interested, you may want to check that out. And we're also having a conference. It's the Xojo Developer Retreat. It's going to be September 19th and 20th in Nashville, Tennessee. And we have a $50 off coupon that you can use this week only if you use the coupon code RETREAT. So I've built a simple little app in Xojo, but of course, this is a desktop app, but I want to show you how easy it is to build the same thing as a web app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new project. And I'm going to choose web this time. And as you can see, it looks almost the same. The only difference is you've got web page and you've got something that looks like a browser, but I'm going to build the same application. Just going to drag some controls out here. Obviously, the more web controls since we're building a web app. And I'll double click, go to the pressed event. And rather than make you watch me type all that code again, the good news is the code's the same. So I'm just going to copy this code from my desktop project, go to my web project and paste and run. Now this time it's a web application, so it's going to launch my browser, but it compiles it to a standalone app. It's got the web server built into it. It compiles to machine code, so it's a completely native app. And here I am in my browser. So let's type a couple of numbers here and type OK or click OK. And there it is. So this is what the message box looks like for the web. But you can see the process of creating the app is the same. The code is generally the same. There may be little differences. There are things you do on the desktop that you wouldn't do in a web app. There's things that you do in a web app you might not do in a desktop app. But most of what you do is going to be nearly identical. Same is true for mobile as well. And with mobile, it will launch like in the case of iOS, it'll actually launch the iOS simulator and show you your app, or you can do it from directly from your phone natively. Okay, so that's my very quick demo of Xojo for those of you that have not seen it before. So now I'm going to turn things over to Tim so that he can talk about how it works with NetSuite. Tim?
All right, thanks. I'm going to try to share my screen. Here, 1 second. All right. All right, you guys can see that, right? Geoff?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. All right, so we already went through who I am and what I do. My goals in today's webinar are to kind of explain to people what low-code software development is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. I'm also going to explain why I think it's needed in the NetSuite space, and then show you why I chose Xojo for my low-code tool, and demo a couple of apps that I built with Xojo that integrate with NetSuite. They're pretty basic. My goal is really just to show you how it works and kind of point you in the right direction to doing that yourself if you're interested. And my big goal, though, is to get you excited about NetSuite, or Xojo rather, and interested in it enough that you download it and give this a shot yourself. I think you're going to like what you see. So here it goes. So I started to call this slide problems, but really where there's problems, there's opportunities. There's more than 31,000 businesses right now running on NetSuite. And if you are in the NetSuite community, whether you're a developer or not, I'm sure you're aware of just how crazy things are right now. Demand for NetSuite developers is high. Really, any NetSuite professional is in high demand. From what I'm seeing on the developer side, though, there's a lot of demand for apps that are both NetSuite native, run inside of NetSuite itself, and also external apps that integrate with NetSuite, whether they're mobile, web, desktop, what have you. And the problem is that there's just not enough NetSuite developers to meet that demand. So I guess my spiel, if you will, my take on all this is that I think low code can help us solve that problem. We can use low code to build solutions faster and more easily than we can, using other tools. I think you can see already with what Geoff showed, just how easy it can be. And the really nice thing about Xojo is that if you learn how to use it, you learn the language, you learn the environment, you're kind of getting, multiple application types that you can build in one tool. So that's really pretty cool. So if you're not a professional software developer, I think low code can act as a way to kind of get you pointed in that direction if you're interested in becoming a software developer, especially if you're someone who's an expert in a certain area and you've got an idea for an app, or you're just, somebody who's in business and needs to solve a problem. I think low code's a good way to help you solve that problem. If you are a professional developer, what I found is that low code tools like Xojo in particular can make you more productive. You can build them faster, can really focus on solving the problem instead of trying to work around the weirdness of the technology itself. So that all said, well, what is low code exactly? I think you kind of got a peek at it with what Geoff showed. It's basically a category of software development tools that make the process of building apps easier, right? Faster, easier. As you saw, with Geoff's demo, it's kind of a combination of a graphical IDE, a tool to build the app, coupled with a real high-level programming language. I think you saw with the Xojo language there, it's pretty intuitive. And the purpose of low code is just to make software development faster and easier, right? You don't have to be a professional developer to use these types of tools. Xojo's not the only low-code tool out there. There's plenty of them out there. It's a huge and growing category of software development tools. But the reason that I chose Xojo after looking at a bunch of them is that, as I mentioned before, with Xojo, it's a cross-platform application development tool. You can use it to build all kinds of things. Desktop apps that run on Macs, Windows, Linux machines, mobile apps. Right now, we can build for iOS, and Android is coming soon. Web apps, console apps. I've even built some apps for the Raspberry Pi, which is kind of fun. Not just fun, but there's actually some practical applications for that, which is kind of cool. I think what you've seen already and what you're going to see as I go through the demos is that the development model, both the IDE and the language, is logical and intuitive. It just sort of, for me anyway, it's just sort of clicks. I don't have to learn some weird language or weird tool to start building apps when I'm in Xojo. And as Geoff mentioned, I use the word generous as far as the licensing plan goes, but the fact that you can download Xojo and give it a shot, you build apps in it all day long, and then when you're finally ready to do something with it and deploy it, I think the licensing plan itself is extremely affordable. It's unlike a lot of other tools that I've seen where you get charged for all kinds of things, how many like copies of the app you distribute, and there's no player, there's nothing along those lines. With Xojo, you are truly creating an app that you can distribute. The upgrade plans are really nice as well. And then the other thing about Xojo is the company's been around for a long time. It's kind of I think a secret weapon for a lot of developers. But it's a solid company. It's not like a company that you've never heard of before. Well, maybe you've never heard of them before, but it's not like they've just started and you're wondering whether they're going to be around in a month, 2 months, or what have you. So on that note, I'm going to show you a couple of demos. One of them is a desktop application that shows how you can integrate with NetSuite and do that through SuiteTalk. It's actually like a little app that lets you query NetSuite through the SuiteTalk API. And then I'm going to show you a couple of iOS apps and then a web application. And I think what you're going to see, what I'm hoping you see with all this, is that the pattern for building these apps is very similar. So regardless of whether you're building an iOS app that's hitting inventory or iOS app that's hitting employees, or a web app, it's a very similar process. So let me switch over to Xojo. And this is my first app. It's very similar to what Geoff showed. This is a desktop app. My window is shown here. You can see all the different controls on it. And I think what I'm going to do is actually run it and then come back and kind of show you what's going on. So just like Geoff did, I'm going to run it, and I'm running it in the Xojo debugger. And I'm going to cheat here and copy some URLs because I don't want to have you see me typing all day long. So what this app does is it lets me submit requests to NetSuite through the SuiteTalk REST API. And in this particular case, I am just sending a GET request for employee records. And see if I click the send button, you can see it comes back with all the data. And if I want to look at one of these records in particular, I can just copy and paste it over here. And this app I built in, I don't know, not very long. I think it's one of the things that's kind of crazy about Xojo is you can go from idea to, a nice looking app. I think this isn't going to win any awards in terms of the interface or anything, but I don't consider myself to be a Mac desktop app developer, right? I'm certainly not a Windows developer. I don't even own a Windows machine, but with Xojo, I'm able to build these apps. So I sent that first request and then got some records back, and then I sent another to get a specific record. I can use the tool to add a record. So if I want to add, for example, an employee named Xojo Developer, change the URL real quick. And so I changed the method to post, and I'm going to send it. Oop, I did something wrong. I already have a developer. Okay, so I'll call this NetSuite Developer 2. And you can see it's coming back telling me that the request was successful. That's what this 204 means. You can also look at the headers. So again, this isn't meant to be a replacement for something like Postman or Paw or anything like that. The reason I built this was I really wanted to see what it would take to integrate a Xojo app with NetSuite. And I figured what better way to do it than actually build something that, showed me or gave me a way to send requests and see the responses coming back. So that's what this is all about. I could send similar requests to update the record that I had just created. So if I want to update the developer to NetSuite Developer 3, do that. It's a put. Hold on a second. Patch. I forgot the number. All right, let me create another one. Okay, so in the response, it actually comes back and tells me what the employee record is that was created. That's the ID of the employee that was created. And I'll just call this NetSuite Xojo Developer and do a patch. You can see it came back with the 204. It's basically just telling me that the request was successful. And if I get the record again, you'll see it's been updated properly. So I don't really want to go too much into the weeds with SweetTalk and make calls against it. But my point in showing you this is that I was able to build this app, and we can take some of the ideas behind it and create other apps that do hit SweetTalk to do things like pull back inventory, pull back employee information, whatever you want to do. So that's what this app is all about. So let me go back to the app itself and let me just kind of show you around a little bit. Just like what Geoff showed, I've got a window with a bunch of controls on it. I've got more controls, obviously, than the demo that he gave. I've got a drop down, a field for the URL. Just like he had, I have a send request button with an action on it. And when I click that button, that's when the request actually gets sent to NetSuite, to SweetTalk. The magic in this app, if there is any, is in this little thing down here that I've created called NS Connection. And basically what this is a control, a class that I created that does all the heavy lifting for you in terms of making a call between Xojo and NetSuite. It sets up the request, it signs it, it sends it, and then it's just up to you to figure out, okay, I've got data coming back. What do I want to do with it? So I have an instance of that class on the window for this app. And when data comes in, it comes in and there's an event that fires called content received. And then, I'm not going to go into every line of code here, but basically I'm doing a bunch of things. I am disconnecting from the connection, keeping track of how long it took so that I can show that to you in the interface. Converting the response that came back into something that looks nice in terms of the way it's formatted, the nice JSON encoded text. Just a bunch of other things down here as well. If there's an error that occurs, it'll actually show me an error message on the screen. And that's how this all works. There's a bunch of different controls for the response. I can actually put the response that comes back into this text field here. And that's what you're seeing when I run the app. I'm updating the information on whether or not the request was successful or not. So again, if I go back and run this app one more time, I'll run a different one this time. You can see there's the app doing everything that I just kind of described. It's bringing the response back. It's formatting the response in a nice, easily, we call it like a pretty JSON pretty response. And there's the response code. And there's all the headers that came back, so on. So my point in showing this to you is that with that class that you saw over here in the app, that NS connection class, I can literally take that and drop it into other apps, whether they are other desktop apps, whether they're iOS apps, web apps, and even to some extent, Android apps. Again, we're beta testing that now. But I can use that one class to make all the calls that I need to make back to NetSuite to either get information, add records, update them, delete them, what have you. So again, that's the desktop app. I'm now going to show you an iOS app. I'm going to run it first. There's not much to this app. Again, I'm really just trying to show you how easy it can be. But basically what it did when it ran, you can see it's actually running in the simulator that Geoff mentioned. It's the iOS simulator. Basically what it did was it made an API call to SweetTalk and said, hey, I need all the active inventory records, sorts them alphabetically, and here are all the results. And if I click on one of these, it'll show me all the details. Nothing particularly exciting about the app other than the fact that I think it's pretty fast. But on the back end of this, it's how simple it is that I think is kind of impressive. There's two windows, if you will, screens, we call them on the iOS side, one for the list view and one for the detail view. And on the list view, I've just got a control that's a table. There's that NS connection class that I showed you in the desktop app, and it does very similar things, right? It's basically getting some data back. In this particular case, it gets the data from SweetTalk, from the response. It unpacks it and just creates rows in the table. So that's what it's doing there. And then when I click a row, if I go to the table, there's an event called selection changed. And so if the user were to click on a row in that table, this code here fires. And all I'm really doing here is saying, okay, I need to create one of these detail views. I want to show it. And here's the record that I want you to show. So when that happens, the detail view opens up. And there's an event handler on it for when the view opens. And what I'm doing here is actually making a second call back to NetSuite to say, okay, I need more information on this one particular record. And when it comes back, here's another connection instance here. When the data comes back, in this particular case, I am unpacking it and displaying the response. In this particular app, I'm actually using HTML to do that. I could unpack it and put all the values into individual fields, and then give the user, if you wanted, depending on the type of app, you could give them an option to edit the data that's coming back, update the record in NetSuite. I'm not going to go through all that in this particular demo, but that's what you could do. What's, I think, really interesting about this app is that there's really, again, there's not much to it. And if I go up into the app itself, there are a couple of variables that I'm setting here. One is actually a query. Let me start with this one. If you're familiar with SweetQL in NetSuite, this is a SweetQL query that's just requesting all of the active inventory items. I'm only asking for the ID, the item ID, and then how many are on hand. You can see I'm sorting the records. And that query is what's used to create the list view. I also have a place here where I can specify the title of the app if I want to do it, just easily change it as a constant. When the person clicks on a record in the table, it also runs another query. And this is that query here. can see I've got a placeholder in there to say, okay, I need more information on this particular record. Here's the ID. And so if you were to go back and look at my code, you can see where when this fires, I'm actually replacing the ID with the ID of the record that the person clicked on in the table. And then the other constants are things like the account number for the NetSuite account, and then the keys. I'm actually using OAuth, token-based authentication in this particular case. So I won't go through all the values here, but that's where you would put them. So again, a really simple iOS app. I'm not showing a lot of things that this app could do, like search. You could add a search feature to it. You could use this as the basis for an app that, maybe you're going around doing physical inventory, and this might be a great start to that. You could, scan a barcode, pull the record up, put in the physical quantity that's there. Maybe you're doing an inventory that's involving bins. You could handle all that in the app as well. But there it is. So I'm going to stop that app, and I'm just going to go to the next one. Very similar. This is an app that shows employees. It's basically an employee directory that's an iOS app. Again, nothing particularly fancy about it, but very similar in how it works. So there's a list view that comes up. I can click on a record and see the details, and so on. And if I go back to the app and open up the app constants, you can see that there's a query here to get the employees. In this particular case, I'm looking for employees that are active, and I'm also limiting to some employees that have an email address that looks like test.com, bringing back the ID of the employee, their name, and then if they have a title, I show that as well. So that text and detailed text are used to populate the table and do it the correct way. When a person clicks on an employee in the table, this query fires, very similar to what you saw in the inventory app, where I'm just passing in an ID and then pulling back a whole bunch of additional information. And then as far as how the data gets shown in that detail view, I'm using HTML again. It's just easier and faster to do it this way. But basically, I just replace all the placeholders with values that come back from the query. So it's extremely efficient, really easy to develop that way. And then all the same values you saw before, the account number, all my credentials, and so on. Again, if I run the app, there it is. So that's that. All right. So as Geoff showed before, it's really easy to take an app that you develop for one platform. Like in this case, again, I've showed you 2 iOS apps. If I wanted to build the same app as a web application, here it is. I've got essentially a web page. In this case, I'm actually showing both the list and detail view on the same web page, but you could have multiple pages if you really wanted. So when I run the app, you're going to see that the list of employees shows up here. And then when I click an employee, it's going to show up over here. So let me just run it real quick. And like Geoff said, this is building a standalone web application that actually has the server built in. There's the list view that loaded. And then if I go ahead and click on one of the records, it's going to load, and there's the details. Again, I'm not trying to win any design awards here. It's really just to show you how easy it is to take the concept and the code from one application, port it over to another type of application, and basically, reuse code. So if I go back to the web app, open up the app. Again, you'll see those very similar, in this case, almost identical queries for the list view and so on. The controls that I used on this are also very similar. Here's a list box that's similar to the table that you saw in the iOS app. And then I'm using an HTML viewer to display the details. basically what I'm doing again is I get the data back from NetSuite, inject it into that little template that's here, and then I just render it as HTML in this HTML viewer. But I could have real fields if I wanted to take the time to drag them out and wire them up. I could drag out, for example, a text field like you saw Geoff do that in his demo. I could have text areas, all kind of things like that, and then unpack it and give the user the ability, if it made sense, give them the ability to edit the record and then save it back to NetSuite. I'm not doing that here. Here we go. Again, that same NS connection class is being used for this app. It's exactly the same control. So that's really been the key for me in building the Xojo apps that I built. Is I built that thing one time and I'm reusing it in all my different Xojo apps that I need to, where I need to talk back to NetSuite and need to integrate with NetSuite. It does all the heavy lifting for you, and there's really not much to it. When I click, for example, let me go back to the iOS app. In this particular case, it doesn't click. So when I load the data, this is really all that's happening. I'm just basically setting up the NS connection class so that it has all the information it needs to send the credentials, telling it that I want to post some data. In this case, I'm actually running a query. Here's what the query is. And I can even specify how long I want to wait for the request times out. And that's it. That's really all that there is to this. So I think it's pretty wild. All right. Let me go back to here. So again, the big takeaways I think are with Xojo, you have one tool and many, I would kind of call them development targets, whether they're the types of applications that you want to build, mobile, desktop, web, or the platforms that you want them to run on, Mac OS, Windows, and so on. So with this one tool, you can really accomplish quite a bit. And I'm not really even beginning to scratch the surface with what I've demoed here today. That NS connection class that I showed, I think makes integrating with NetSuite really easy. There's not much to it. If you know SweetTalk, then like essentially telling the connection, the NS connection class what you want it to do becomes kind of trivial. And I'm making that available, by the way, as part of all the apps that you saw here today. I'm making it available for free, so you can just drop it into a Xojo project and give it a shot. And again, I think the big opportunity, or the big takeaway here too, is the opportunities. Whether you're a NetSuite developer that's looking to kind of branch out a little bit, maybe you're getting requests for apps that aren't NetSuite native. Maybe you're being asked to create mobile apps, web apps, what have you. This is a great way to maybe accomplish that. And if you are a Xojo developer and you're looking for opportunities to apply those skills, I think you've got kind of a big target here. You know, again, there's over 30,000 companies using NetSuite right now, and a lot of them are looking for help. So, you know, there's potential there as well. So there's a lot that I showed. I know I went very quickly. There's a lot also that I didn't cover. I didn't show you how to create, update, or delete records, but again, you could very easily build that into your UIs of your apps. And then it's just a matter of using that connection class to send the right kind of request to NetSuite, tell it to create a record, update a record, or what have you. I didn't show how to authenticate. And by that, I mean, if you're building an app that's customer facing, you know, maybe you want to build an iOS app and give it to your customers to let them place orders or check the status of their orders, and you want them to authenticate. I didn't show how to do that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I didn't show how to deploy an app. So if you've got an iOS app or a desktop app, sometimes getting it in the hands of your users can be a challenge, you know, involving getting it on app stores, if that's the route you're going to take. And for the web app, I didn't really talk too much about hosting, but I will say that Xojo has a hosting service. And maybe Geoff can talk a little bit about that before we wrap up. You could also put those Xojo-based web apps on really any server, whether it's Mac, Windows, Linux. And finally, I didn't show Android yet. I'd hope to have a demo available for this, but I think in the future, maybe in a future webinar, we'll do that when Android is more complete. I have had a lot of success with it so far. It's pretty cool. So I think for those of you who are interested in building mobile apps for Android, it's very similar. Basically, I just took that NS Connection class. I had to tweak it a little bit to get my apps to work, but for the most part, it's pretty seamless, very similar to iOS, very similar to the other targets that you saw me build apps for here today. And if there is interest in any of these other topics, let us know. We'll be happy to do a webinar in the future, or I'll blog about it. So here's what I would recommend if you are interested in what you saw here today. I would just download Xojo. It's free to download. It's free to build with. I'm also going to make all the projects that I showed you here available for download. So you'll be able to pull them down, open them up in Xojo, run them, tweak them, point them at your own NetSuite instance, whatever. And I highly recommend, if you're interested in Xojo and you want to learn quickly, there's a really great YouTube channel that I've come across by Byron Minnick, and there's the URL. He's got some really awesome tutorials to kind of get people started with Xojo, especially if you're new to development. And two more things. Geoff mentioned the Xojo Developer Retreat. He also mentioned that Xojo is on sale this week. I didn't have that on here early enough or quickly enough. But there's also a deal going on. There's a product or a bundle called Omega Bundle. And if you're interested in Xojo development, this bundle is pretty cool. It comes with a lot of really nice Xojo plugins. It comes with a subscription to a magazine for Xojo, all kind of great stuff in there. I highly recommend it if you think you're going to become interested in wanting to develop really cool Xojo apps. And I think that's it.
Well, I'll mention real quick that, when it comes to web apps, the simplest way to deploy them is through our web service, Xojo Cloud. It's built right into the Xojo IDE. So when you're ready to deploy your app, you go and get, through our web store, you go and get a server, and then the server just appears in the IDE, and you just click a button and deploy straight, right there in the inspector. So it'll appear, you pick your server, and then you just hit the deploy button up in the toolbar, and your app is deployed. With web apps, half the battle is the deployment side. With desktop apps and mobile apps, it's not as well. With mobile, it's just going through the app store, but still for the user, they just download the app to their phone. And for a desktop app, it's the same thing, download it to your desktop. But for web apps, it's got to be out on a server somewhere that people can access. There's security and all kinds of things to deal with. And Xojo Cloud takes care of all of that for you, so that you just focus on building your app. And then when you deploy it, you don't have to worry about security and hosting and all that stuff. So that's the benefit there. I want to mention that as Tim was showing that demo, it just reminded me of my own experience with building apps. Lately, I've been building a lot of apps that use services through APIs, just like what Tim was showing. And even though I personally have had a lot of experience writing software over the years, there's something magical about passing a URL, off into the internet and getting the results back you want. And if you've never built software before, the great thing about Xojo and doing this kind of app is you can learn very incrementally. You can learn just a little bit. A lot of development tools require you to learn a mountain of information before you can really do anything practical. And that can be daunting, and it can be, it can make you feel like, maybe this is beyond me, that sort of thing. But with Xojo, it's such an incremental process. You can drag out a button and make it do something really simple, and drag out a few more controls, and just keep learning and building as you go. And then you get to the point where, you want to start like what Tim's doing. You're contacting some service on the internet, and you can do that really, really easily and get the data back, and then learn how to get that data into the user interface you want to build for it, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. But that's the other thing. I think Tim would agree that building applications in Xojo is fun, and it should be. So
Yeah, it is. The first app that I showed, that the SweetTalk Explorer, at first I was just happy to be able to put in a URL and get some data back and show the raw response. And then I thought, well, that's pretty neat, but the response was ugly. And
right.
so I went on to Xojo's forum and I searched for a way to make it look nice, where the text is indented and everything.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was code there from Paul, who's a Xojo developer, works in Xojo. And I just took his class and dropped it in, and it was, I'm not kidding, it was really that easy. All of a sudden, there it is. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat. I wonder what else I can do with this. The next thing the app that really only took you about 5 minutes to go from concept to like, oh, look, it's working. Like a couple hours later, after you've kind of played around with different controls, and I wonder if I can do this, and wonder if I can do, it's next thing you've got an app. And granted, it's a simple app, but it is pretty cool. I
Hey,
think.
it's not a question of complexity, it's a question of the value. And
Right.
the one thing is, once you have a little bit of success, then you have to start drawing the line at, well, I got to stop somewhere. I've got to deploy the app at some point, right? Because you can just keep adding more and more features to your app. There's a question from one of the attendees, noting the price of NetSuite. I wonder what size company would be a target demographic for this kind of work. I know the local mom and pops I often work for will probably not opt for NetSuite. I don't know what pricing of NetSuite's like. You're a lot more familiar with that. So
yeah, it's not cheap. And I think you're looking at it, I would look at it the other direction, rather than trying to figure out who you can sell NetSuite to. There's 31,000 NetSuite customers out there, many of which are just, chomping at the bit to have things done. Not all of them are looking for iOS apps or external apps, but a lot of them are. That's where I think the opportunity is. If you're a Xojo developer, it's just a matter of reaching out to those NetSuite developers. And I can certainly, give you ideas, maybe in another blog post or something, on how to reach those people. But again, I would kind of look at it the other way around. What existing NetSuite clients are out there that might need an app that you can build with Xojo.
Okay, so someone else has asked, would you have any suggestions for good sources of NetSuite users looking for developers? So how do they get into that community?
Well, it's not, I will say this, it's not easy if you're an independent developer, it's not easy to just break into NetSuite development. And it's not like other platforms. I'm going to, like, for example, ServiceNow is a really good example of one where it's really easy. That and Salesforce, right? Like, it's easy to sign up as a developer, get a test account, and learn it, start integrating with it. It's a little bit harder to do that with NetSuite because they don't really have, they have developer programs, but they're not cheap and they're not easy to get into. So the key is finding either a NetSuite consulting firm or development firm that's looking for help, or again, finding an existing NetSuite customer that's looking for just an app being built, and sort of getting access that way. And there's other ways that I can share sort of offline with how you might want to make this happen. But
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you find a NetSuite user that, hey, I need some help building an app, or I want you to build an app for me, if you're already comfortable with Xojo, from what you've shown, the API for SweetTalk is pretty straightforward. So that's going to be the easy part. So that sounds like a really good way to. And where do NetSuite customers, where do they congregate? Is there a place that they kind of chat? Or
I mean, there's a couple of different places. One, and I'm not a big social media fan, but LinkedIn, there's all kind of NetSuite groups on there, whether it's users or administrators or developers. And then there is a NetSuite Slack, where a lot of people in the NetSuite community sort of hang out, if you will. They ask questions, they help others. And there are official NetSuite forums as well. So, but I think, again, I think it's just a matter of networking, getting the word out that you can build those kinds of apps. The reason that I use SweetTalk on those demos today is that the SweetTalk API, and especially now the newer REST version of that, is available to every NetSuite account. There's no extra charge for it. So every NetSuite, all those, 31,000 companies that are on NetSuite, those all have access to that API. And if you know how to use it, you know how to write apps that hit NetSuite through the API, you're good to go. It's really just a matter then of figuring out what the customer wants. Sometimes the nuances of NetSuite itself, you know, it's definitely an odd system to write software for. But once you get the hang of it, it's pretty cool. I didn't, honestly, when I started using NetSuite, I didn't think I was kind of like it. And now I kind of love it. So.
And I think you mentioned to me before the webinar, we were talking that with the way the NetSuite licensing works, often NetSuite users will want to expose some small portion of the NetSuite functionality to some number of employees, but they don't want to pay for licenses for all those employees. And if they go through the API, they don't have that licensing issue. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more to it than that, but that's a good way to sum it up. And it's not just employees necessarily, but customers, the general public.
Right. Anyone who isn't a kind of a core user, basically.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, then it's just a matter of determining what's the best type of app to meet that need. If it's a sort of an audience that you know, it's a group of users, maybe it's your customers, partners, employees, then maybe a mobile app makes sense. If it's something that you think is going to be used by the public, a good example might be a web app where you're checking order status, or you want to give the public a way to check on availability of an item. Then building it as a web app where there's really no need to authenticate the user might make more sense. But the idea, the process is the same. Like you basically saw with the apps I built today. It was just a matter of me. I wish I could have shown, and I probably should have done that, but I went from that inventory iOS app to the employee app in like maybe 10 minutes. All I did was change the queries, and it was pretty cool.
So the URLs and things and Slack and all that you mentioned for gaining access to the NetSuite community, can you put that kind of stuff up on your website or something so people can, because other users have been asking, well, how do I get started? And I think an introduction into the NetSuite community, knowing where to go to find NetSuite users would be a great thing to do. Another user is asking, for an average Xojo developer, for example, what's the learning curve like for SweetTalk? If I've never used it before, what's that like?
I think the SweetTalk is pretty simple. It's pretty easy to learn. It's like any sort of RESTful API. I think it can be weird. Like you saw when I sent that first request for records, it basically comes back with a list of other URLs to other records, but it doesn't tell me what they are. And so I'm going to be honest here. I'm not a fan of RESTful APIs. There's an API that I have that I'm going to be making available as open source that is, I think, just a lot easier to use. It supports being able to query, just like you saw. I can query the data, get records back. I can do all kinds of stuff, get results back from saved searches. And to me, it's much more developer friendly API. But anyway, I guess to kind of get back to the actual question, it's not a very difficult, SweetTalk REST is not very difficult to learn. It's just a matter of sort of learning the nuances of it. You saw me run the SweetQL query through it. That would be the way I would recommend that you get data back. And then as far as like updating records, it really is pretty simple. It's just a matter of changing the method and changing what the payload is going up, and there you go. You could actually use that SweetTalk Explorer app, which again I'm going to make available after the call. You could use that to start playing with the calls and experimenting on your own. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is you could like start just putting URLs in and seeing what you get back. Oh, there's another URL. Copy and like you did, copy and paste, and then put it in and see what happens.
I didn't show it, and because I had never done this again, I don't consider myself to be a desktop application developer, but I think it was the night before last, I thought, well, how hard would it be for me to make it so that that app that had one window, the SweetTalk Explorer, if I could pop another window and issue another query. So I started playing around with menus and couldn't be any easier. Next thing you
Yeah.
know, so you can actually go into that app and open as many windows as you want, send different requests, and it's pretty cool. So
Yeah, I
it's
found
easy
that
to think.
I was going to say, I found that, you can, learn a lot basically through experimentation. Some APIs for services on the internet will return JSON. Xojo's got great support for JSON, but like in the apps I've written, I spent most of my time basically trying to figure out how they organize their data. It's like, oh, I was thinking that was going to be just a field, but it's actually a list of values. Okay, change my code a little bit to deal with a list coming back instead of just a single value, that sort of thing.
Right.
Another user is asking, Tim, could this be used to make a better looking version of the customer portal? I guess that's something in NetSuite itself.
Yeah, so NetSuite does have some sort of, I won't say public facing, but they do have some web applications, some portals for customers, vendors, employees. And yeah, you could certainly use Xojo to build web apps that do that. Again, I think the part of it that you would want to try to figure out is how you're going to authenticate those users, and we can certainly cover that in other webinars or in blog posts in the future. But yeah, I mean, that app that I showed is one of the reasons I kept all the apps really, really simple, is I didn't want to end up going down the rabbit hole of here's how to do a little spinner, here's how to handle search, right? Because the next thing you know, it's, we've been talking for almost an hour. We could talk for 2 or 3 hours and we just keep going, and it really is easy to add those features. It really is.
And for those of you that haven't done anything like that before, usually what most REST APIs do is you say this is the user, and they send back, you send a username and a password, and they send back a token. And a token's just a jumble of data. And basically each time you make an API call, you just need to send that value back. So that's their way of knowing that you're, legitimate, essentially. So you're not sending the password every time, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and you could definitely do that with a Xojo app. I'm using OAuth 1, so like the token is kind of fixed, if you will. But
Right.
you could use OAuth 2 for that kind of thing, or for a mobile app. Yeah, you've got a lot of options, I think.
Yeah.
There.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions, Tim, is that it? Do you have anything else?
I think, let me just look at my keynote thing.
I'm just going to remind everybody, like both Tim and I have said, if you aren't using Xojo now, you can download it for free. You can learn it for free. You can build your apps for free. It's only until you want to deploy them so that build standalone versions so that other people can use them, that you have to purchase a license. The licenses are yearly, so you get all the updates for a year. And when your license runs out, it's like a magazine subscription. You can still use Xojo, you just won't get updates, right? So that's why I say it's like a magazine subscription. And,
yeah, you can still read the magazines that you bought.
Right, exactly.
And,
that's why I use that.
Can't
that's
read
why I use that analogy. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And remember, we do
great.
have a sale running till next Monday, 20% off. And again, if you're interested in coming to our retreat, it's in Nashville on the 19th and 20th of September, and we have a $50 off coupon. Just use retreat this week during our sale. So Tim, I really appreciate you being here for this.
Yeah, I hope everybody got something out of it. And again, I really hope that people will take the time to download Xojo and play with it. I'm gonna try to get a blog post up either this afternoon or this evening, so you'll be able to download everything that you saw here and tweak it, break it. That's usually what I do. I break something and try to figure out. Sometimes that's the best way to learn, right?
Wow,
if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There's also the Xojo forums that we didn't mention, but that's a great way to get to see what other people are doing, get help, that sort of thing. So there you go. Indeed. And maybe we'll do another one in the future. I hope we get a chance to do this again.
Cool. Right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Tim.
See you later.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.